Okay, number one for Sunday. I'll try to go a little shorter on some of these. There's a link on some of the posts I gave you, okay? Because there's certain things we can verify and document. But it's a little offensive to some people, that link. But it's from Patriot Dad's site. Now, he did some pretty good analysis and investigation, particularly dealing with his belief that some of the killings or suicides of judges within this county, Tom Greenwell, he gave the rate of conviction in Mr. Greenwell's court on sex crimes, molestation of children, things like that. And he showed, now I think I got it right, that out of all of the sex crimes that were ruled, particularly like molestations, that all of the rulings Mr. Greenwell ruled on, he had not one conviction. Now, there might have been like 7 or 8 cases, and he even had comments from Tom Greenwell, who is now dead, that said, well, a lot of the cases, they're not investigated. The other thing, Judge Greenwell lived here, where I live, in Flower Bluff. A lot of Flower Bluff stuff. But he had a boyfriend, okay? Fuentes. Now, Greenwell, this is what's disturbing to some, but Greenwell gave the National Registry for sex offenders like the certain percentage. And the highest percentage was among male homosexuals. And Patriot Dad also said the media normally doesn't speak about that, though that's a statistic they use because of political correctness. And then the other high statistic would be bisexual males. Okay. Some of the stuff that happens in society, if I went to the cases I talked about, even if you have them within law enforcement, a lot of my friends that have been here, I had Crow and Mike here the last few weeks, it's been a while, but I'm actually trying to show them some of the new stuff. I guess they never saw my little billboard. There's a verse that Pastor Bill used. Sometimes on Sunday we talk about this, but it was a modern translation of "Write the vision and make it plain upon tables." Habakkuk, the prophet, that he may run that readeth it, for the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak and not lie. Though it tarry, wait for it, for it will surely come. But the translation Bill used said, "Write the vision and make it plain upon billboards." And I said, oh, I like that. The word of the Lord goes out. Now, I just mentioned that because in some of the stuff that he did document, Patriot Dad and others, it kind of showed if you did have, he believes that Judge Greenwell had a 0% rate of conviction within his court because he believes that there's like an illegal judges, prosecutors, some lawyers, people that are connected, are part of like a adult sex thing, but he thinks maybe they have connections. All right, now how does that play? I know he documents some things, but it plays, and why would you have the chief there in San Diego? Why would there be no, if people in Robstown that cops investigated Mr. Nava, Chief Nava in San Diego, but yet it was turned over to the DA, who was Mark Skirka. Now, all of these people do indeed have connections. So there could be more to some of these things. So if you have the highest rate of sexual offense among male homosexuals or bisexuals, then whether they're on a police department or whether they're in civilian society, if you have that going on, certainly, out of all the things that you would have for discipline, that would be something that you would say, wait a minute. And I did document to you how some PD officers also, if they had a history of violence, and then they were told by their supervisors, look, you're never going to get a hand laid on, and then that happens later, that shows you at least in that particular thing, there are reoffenses among CCPD when they're told, don't beat up, don't assault, don't commit. All right. Now, I was going to take a ride to Bishop today, and Miss Watts and all of the judges that make decisions on things, you are held liable and accountable, particularly if there was some corruption within Mr. Skirka, withholding of evidence or not revealing full evidence. Why was I going to go to Bishop? I used to make this ride every morning early when I was on duty, earlier than now, and I liked it because I'd go down the highway and go through the cities. But I've had friends in Bishop and Kingsville since 1980. And I used to, through the ministry, I would go to Bishop all the time. I miss some of those visits. A lot of families, a lot of friends, some who are friends on Facebook. So I know so many people over in that area. Kingsville, I retired as a firefighter, but I did 25 years in Kingsville and lived there until 1992. From 80 to 92, was in the Navy over there. One of my friends, I did his funeral. That family still lives out in Bishop, and I did some Bible studies there. So I got to give you a little background, because Miss Watts, these people they don't know the Hispanic community to some white people, or Mexican people to some white people. To them, to some, there's an inherent I know I've lived with a lot of people for many years in community. So Rolando Ramirez, one of the first families I worked with in Bishop, and his father who passed away, his brother's still alive, some of them. But Rolando Ramirez, one night, BB was his nickname. I loved BB like I love all my friends. But he had a history. But one night he was being pursued by the cops many, many years ago in Kingsville in the 90s, I guess, or 80s. And he died. I visited BB in the hospital with his mom, and he was in there for a week. The cops had beat BB up. Rolando Ramirez, he had a very violent background. He had previously shot as a juvenile in Bishop. He was picked up by law enforcement, and somehow, and he was a juvenile at the time, he managed to get their gun, and he shot them to the back seat of the vehicle. He didn't kill them, but he shot them through the back seat. So he had a violent history. But I did his funeral along with another minister, but that was friends, so they'd ask. I said, okay. I remember speaking. He's buried. I could take you to the grave. It's a 40-minute ride. So I know a lot of people in Bishop. And you say, why are you so hung up on that case, John, with the Kingsville Carpenter? Because I know a lot of people over there. Would it be evidence? Let's say this. Would this be a part, when you investigated that rape case, one of the disturbing things that did come out in the paper, besides just from statements that the man made, it showed me that they fabricated that out of anger because he did not, more than likely what that man said was he didn't want to sleep with that lady and have sex with her. Okay, now if you ruled, I think Watts ruled, and then you berated him, if you were wrong, and if there was an inherent bias in you, because you're not really part of the population, you live on some scale, there's a scripture. So either way, would part of that investigation be whether or not she called somebody else that night, the day that, according to the Kingsville Carpenter, he said, I'm not going to sleep with you. That's what he is saying. All right, would part of the investigation include whether she called somebody, a Mexican man, and just said, tonight, let's have sex? Okay, that would be big, and you would say, but that wouldn't be a big cover-up. Like, in a common community, then you would look at DNA. The Calder Times reported in the conviction of that man, who Watts berated as some noble judge. This is why it's so important for you to have discernment within your position, whether you're male or female. The Times reported this. The DNA, which would be a big thing, look, that would be a big thing, semen. They said it wasn't a full match because statistically it could have matched many other people. How about if it was 100% match on another person that was in Bishop? Say if it was that. Well, John, surely any court, any system, if the match of the DNA was another, say, Hispanic male that was invited to have sex that evening, surely the Nueces County, if that was it. So they reported it matched other males as well, but it could have matched the carpenter. Do you know they could make a statement like that, meaning this: it was male DNA. Well, every rape case would be male DNA. And they could also say, because it was male DNA, it was the DNA of a male, meaning male semen. We live in a day where, look, when you have the semen, okay, you have the famous John Bonet case where there's no semen, but they're looking at like any little types of scraps left, like a fingernail. Okay, in those cases, DNA, but when you have semen in a rape case, male semen, you don't have, it might be, 40% of the whole population. No, you have a match. See, this is why, these are things. You say, well, surely if I was a judge and ruled over that and certain things, you're responsible for all this in your decrees. You make sure. That's why the example I gave you. And if you had all that, that's why in the ruling of Solomon, without DNA, without blood testing, it was the statements of the women, and even in this case of the man, that give you enough wisdom to say, okay, we see now. But then when you have a corruption, Patriot Dad believes that there's a lot. And he also gave you statistics that male homosexuals or bisexuals, according to the national tracking on sex offenders and all, they're more prone to repeat. Okay, and if you had something like that within a police department, that maybe they repeated violence when they were told don't do violence, then they also have other friends that had to also perform sexually. Okay, you would think. So you have so much here. So I'll start it on this one just to say, yes, all these things, some of the things we know for sure that take place within this community. But others, we're not positive. We're not positive. There's a verse that says, Charlie quotes this a lot. I'll try and go short, but he says, at the end, when there's a judgment, the angels come, messengers as well, but they remove all of the things that offend, whether it's people that have committed sex crimes, whether it's people that have, but also those that offend in the sense that they're in a capacity where they have oaths, they have laws, they have, to me it's an offense even in the silly, to you it might sound silly, but in the silly scenario of the jury duty, any common sense person would have said, we apologize that we arrested you at your home because obviously our court officer in the jury duty, they lied there in the court. Obviously Ms. Watts said one of you won't. Okay, instead of that, there was an arrogance with Ms. Watts that said, because at first, even when I complained highly in the hall, like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? And I have the care of a kid at my house, would you verify with CPS? But there's an arrogance. Most people that she would or others, there's an arrogance that I'm a white woman. And that if I, in my desire to, I'm sure her desire is to do well, but there might be cases where you, because of that arrogance, And so you should have apologized to me that day, instead of continuing to use that arrogance from the bench and saying, we find you. And then I rightfully said, you should give me a ride home. And in the hallway they laughed. Like, don't you know? We have all types of things that, yeah, I know. So it says the angels will come and messengers come at the time of the kingdom. Angels also. So what do you mean when you say the kingdom is here now? I know many of these things, many people are aware of in some of the street situations and things. But many times people were afraid to shine light. There were, in many cases over the last 10, 15 years in Oasis County, there was a lot of corruption that went on that people were aware of. And so I just give you that Bishop case to say it's highly likely that, and that's not the first case, but it's highly likely. That's why when you're in a court and something severe like that, and you've had multiple accusations, not in Nueces County, but in South Texas, and some of these were against Hispanic men. And you got to make sure there's not an inherent smugness among a white woman judge or a white lawyer, like an inherent smugness. Won't tell you don't. And I do believe that plays a role. I do believe that plays a role. That's where you have also that same type of, you speak out for the poor, okay? You speak out for the poor. So today I would normally do, but my daughter is at Mudfest, so I'm going to probably go and take the dogs again. But I want you to see. There's no, when you have male semen and a woman does a rape kit, whether she said she was forced to shower or not, when you have male semen, meaning it's not like years later, the DNA testing under John Bonet, there's not, well, we didn't have, look, if you have male semen, you can match that in our day, okay? We're not ignorant here. So how could maybe they have made a statement like that in the colder times? You had people lying about lab tests. There was a lady that all the cases, I think this is Massachusetts, every lab test, she just faked it. But we're not ignorant here in the public. Maybe you have a feeling, well, there's a bunch of just Mexican people, low lives. We could get away with something like that. But in Scripture, the discernment, the scriptural basis of law, in Scripture, you didn't have the role. I've said this in a kind way in the past. You didn't have the role of a prosecutor. You simply had statements. The most just system of law from which we derive natural law. You didn't have DNA or any of that, and I'm glad we have it today. But you had statements. The judgments were made by the statements of the accuser and the statements of the person that was in defense. See, that was the basis of biblical law. Out of the mouth comes the things of the heart. And normally it's through interviews with accusers and defenders. Normally that's how you see. And I'm not against all the other ways. But there were some very clear things from the statements, which is how they made righteous judgments in the Old Testament. And the leaders, if you will, I understand we have judge scriptures, I can quote them. The king that sits on the throne scat as well evil with his eyes. We too, as people of God, have judgment. Those of you, Jesus said, that have been with me, you sit on 12 thrones, judging the 12 tribes. There's also an element of that. The Davidic kingdom among us, meaning the rule of Christ, the son of David. Miss Watts and Ludicky both, she speaks all these languages. Just understand the human language. Understand, just discern between that. So, I wanted you to see that thing about the bishop thing. I have a lot of history and time and years spent helping the people that you disdain, people that were my church was made up, the home church I started in Kingsville, it was all, I just did laugh. I said, I'm like the only white guy here. It's jokes. I kid with the guys. And I think sometimes the inherent bias within people also affects the way they make judgments. So I wanted you to see that. And in all the time, there was a Pop's situation. The people that Pops rented the apartment from when he lived off Waco Street. By We the People News, by the Nueces Courthouse. There was one of the sons of the lady who owns that property. Nice lady. And I used to talk to her. But the ex-wife said that the husband molested the child. The ex-wife still works at a bank in Corpus Christi. But the child has now gotten older and has come out publicly and said, oh, I lied. The guy, he got out of jail, the son. He did maybe 10 years. He can't live next to schools. Let me say, and there have been many. Everyone that has made a judgment in a case, whether it's, you do not, if you judge wrongly, you do not get a pass from God, because the scripture says God is just as mad when the guilty are acquitted as when the innocent are proclaimed guilty. That angers God. I pray, there's a prayer I pray when I'm right here. Let the sighing of all the prisoners come before you, that according to the greatness of your power, you might preserve those who are appointed unto death. It's a scriptural key. You can gather the prayers of the people. That's one of the images in Revelation, when they're saying, how long, O Lord? And you have the angels, the incense. We can gather the prayers of the oppressed. I do that over nations, people, sweet little kids that are throughout the earth living in Syria and bad places. So we gather the prayers of the oppressed and the afflicted. But you speak truth. You speak truth. And all of the cases that I collect in prayer like this, I added some new ones to prayer. What that's now doing is bringing life here. There's an arrogance if you think, I've done my best as a judge, and it's possible there's a percentage of 10% people that were innocent in all my judgments, but yet I still berated them. If you were wrong, you are now on the wrong side of God and the wrong side of history. I will say this much. If that carpenter from Kingsville was innocent, and you said to him before your court, or any of the others who were innocent, and you said, how dare you, you despicable man. What I do is I bring that now to the court of God and say, if those judgments were wrong, when thy judgments are in the earth, if those judgments are wrong, and you see these videos and watch them, in all of those cases now, may God's Spirit now come and magnify God with me. If you're uncomfortable that somebody's using your name, you are a public figure, you're open to all criticism. Thankfully, we have freedom of speech. I actually believe, Miss Sandra Watts, you're unfit to hold that bench. That is my honest opinion. And I hope everybody, that's why I put so many Constance Luke, Sandra Watts. That's why I use the name a lot. Because when they're Googled, when they come up. I'm not saying you're a criminal woman, but I'm saying in the cases that were quite plain, and that you still use your authority, which I actually believe is out of the biblical order of God, when you berate a male that you deem to be either of another, he's not white in some of the cases. I believe there might be an inherent racism which exists within society. And I believe some of the statements you've made from the bench, and that Carpenter case, when it was all said and done, he said, I knew I should have told my story. He said, I knew I should have spoke out. You also get away with a lot of this stuff because you take the voices from people. Mr. Morton's case, famous case. Again, that was Texas corruption. All those years he was falsely accused of the murder of his wife. Texas courts, Texas judges, Texas prosecutors. In that case, all the false accusations, Mr. Morton was accused of killing his wife. The son, who witnessed the murder, but he was young at the time, just gave a description. They never used his son's description. But after all the years in prison, Mr. Morton was innocent. He worked at a Walmart in Texas. But this was, that prosecutor in that case sits and awaits hell because he's never repented, and he did all he could to hold that evidence. That's Texas. Do you understand? That you're part of that. You say it's wrong, John, to associate me with all the other criminal activity within Texas courts, and just as wrong as it is for you, dear, to associate all gang and Hispanic. Well, they're just Mexicans. Whether they're gangs or not, they're just as wrong. But all the years Morton was in prison, the one thing I've watched a documentary, his famous case, his son said he read all of the articles about his father when he got older. He killed her because the mother didn't want to have sex with him on his birthday. Therefore, he brutally killed her again. Penis stuff. Therefore, that was his motivation. And he was innocent all those years. But all the lies that you, in your system, and those statements you make from the bench, which you should be very careful, because any proclamation from the bench, from a court that's under oath, if you're wrong when you speak to that Kingsville carpenter or any Hispanic in your court, and you say you are the most despicable human being, if you're wrong, you've released an accusation that at this present time is incurring a judgment upon you because of the kingdom, because it's being spoken. If you're wrong, it's not just you did your best. No, you've spoken accusation. And in Scripture, even in the rulings of the judges in Scripture, in the biblical rule of law, when the determination was made of guilt or innocence, in Scripture you did not have a judge or the elders of the community then saying things that you are all saying from the bench. You didn't have in Scripture, if someone was found guilty or someone was found innocent, there was no role, there was no biblical role to them to make accusation and say you're a despicable human being. You think that's a biblical role. You also encourage judgment because you spoke those words into this community. And so Morton's son learned how to hate his father in those very clear cases of wrongful conviction. And where did that hatred from his son come from? That he didn't want to visit him. They were from the words. They were from false words spoken by the prosecutor in Michael Morton's case. They were from the false words which he read the scenarios of an assault and a murder of his mother, and which was all false. So the hatred came from the false testimony of the prosecutors and judges who spoke those wrong words of condemnation. So if any of the cases you rolled over, Miss Watts, if any were innocent and then you had a conviction and then you spoke those words, we now bring them back. You see, we bring them before the court. Let the sighing of all the prisoners come before you, God. And according to the greatness of your power, preserve the people that are appointed unto death. And that's a true thing. These words that I'm speaking here are the word of God. So yes, within this system and within this society, there are many that have believed that there's a tremendous amount of corruption and criminal activity that goes on. 29 minutes, I get some scriptures out, okay?